Welcome back to C's Listening Room. It is a very cold Saturday afternoon. I think our high today is going to be 23 Fahrenheit. Very cold. It's a great day to just sit inside, keep warm, and talk. And today, I'm going to talk a little bit about this group called Sloan, the album One Chord to Another. That's the cover right there. These guys are Canadian, but they look like Liverpoolian mop top lads there. Look like they're from like 1960s England. And they say that you can't judge a book by its cover. That certainly does not apply to albums. Before I get into that, I'm going to get into the backstory about how this band even entered my little realm of awareness. I'm in the Detroit area, just north of the city. I grew up a couple suburbs from here, and we had a radio station called 89X, 88.7. They went on the air, I want to say 1992, maybe a little earlier, and they broadcast up until they were broadcasting up until about 2 years ago, I want to say, and they switched to a country format because I mean that's the hot format. That's what sells in most of the country. So they were an alternative rock station, and they were like our local source for anything that was going on with music trends. They were actually a Windsor station. They were out of Windsor, Ontario. They had a studio in Windsor. They were licensed out of Windsor. But about 80% of their listening, like 90% of their listening audience was here on the U.S. side. So they had an office in Michigan, and they had a Michigan phone number so that you didn't have to call Canada and go visit a Canadian office for anything like prizes or merchandise and to make a request or anything. And they were very influential, especially during the 1990s. I would say it was probably one of the most influential radio stations for me growing up as a 90s teen. This was the era when grunge was popular. Then you had your post-grunge, and you had a lot of subgenres that were all kind of lumped together as alternative, like punk, pop punk. Then you had the return of ska music and like ska punk, ska pop. And you started getting a lot more of like the trip hop or the more techno type music that was becoming popular. And so I would say from like 1993 to about 2000, this was a station that I listened to a lot. And the music on this station had really influenced a lot of my purchasing decisions. But because they were a Canadian station, they had to abide by the CanCon requirement, which is basically Canadian content. A certain percentage of all music that they played had to be from a Canadian artist. That's something that basically I think the CBC or whatever requires of all radio stations in Canada. And so even though they were broadcasting to like a 90% American audience, they still were licensed in Canada and had to abide by the CanCon policy. So one clever thing they did was they would have a radio show on, I think it was on Sundays, I want to say, called Canadian Exports. So it's like an hour of all modern music from Canadian bands. And it was like basically like their little radio show that helped them reach their CanCon agreement while also exposing the music to an American audience. And that's where I first heard of Sloan, because they had mentioned at the end of one of the shows the band's name when they were doing a rundown of all the songs that they had played that episode. So this album came out in 1996. And I was up in my bedroom, this 1996, remember, with a boombox and a tape player. And Canadian Exports came on. And they played like 4 songs in a row from this album. And I got it on tape, and I would listen to it on my way to and from school. I drive to school, drive home, had this tape of the songs I taped off the radio, complete with the station IDs in between. And this is definitely one of my jams. This 4 of my jams. I think there are like 4 songs or 5 songs off this album that all got played in a row on this Canadian Exports show. So that's where I first found out about it. It's from this Canadian radio station, 89X, broadcasting to us Americans, and their show specifically about Canadian music. And I found it about a year later at a music store, and already being familiar with some of the songs, I like, okay, I'll buy this. Coincidentally, I've been listening to it for the past week for show preparation on my daily commute. Much like I used to listen to the tape with like 4 songs on it on my daily commute, I've been listening to this now 20-some years later on my daily commute for this past week. And I'm glad that this CD is out of my car now. I'm glad that I'm not playing it, because a couple of these songs are really getting stuck in my head. It's like I've been listening to them a couple of times, and they're just like banging around in there all day and all night. But as I said, you can judge an album by its cover. That's the cover. You open it up, you can really get where I'm coming from. This guy here, he definitely thinks he's John Lennon. There's that guy there. I mean, these guys look British. Look at that, those eyeglasses, those hairdos. I mean, this looks like it was recorded in like London in 1968. They're an indie band. They're considered modern rock, but I would say just about every song on this album incorporates something that is very deliberately 60s-esque or 70s-esque, with a strong emphasis on the Beatles. I would say pretty much from beginning to end, there are some vocal harmonies throughout the entire album that definitely resemble the Fab Four. There are a lot of John Lennon influenced vocal stylings on several songs. Little guitar fills here and there that, I mean, they sound like they were from like the Sgt. Pepper's era. There's even one song. I'm trying to think which one it might be. There's a song on here that, I mean, really sounds like a Beatles song, and there's a piano part that sounds like it was like directly taken from Lady Madonna or whatever that song was called. But there's another song, believe it's Take the Bench, maybe? Might be track 8. Anyone's one of these tracks that has more of like this glam rock intro. Almost sounds like Get It On, Bang a Gong from T-Rex. Or maybe a little bit of Long Cool Woman in a Black Dress from the Hollies. Like late 60s, early 70s British glam. There's like guitar riff throughout the song, and like at the intro where those are the 2 songs that it kind of reminds me of when it kicks in. A couple songs that stray a little bit from that formula, but there's always something in there that's very 60s-esque, very 70s-esque. I'd play it. I would go on there right now and play it. I just have to be careful. I have to look at what the legal abilities here are, because I don't want to get in trouble with the copyright police. But I guess I'll describe some of the highlights the best I can, safely without any copyright infringements. But track 1, The Good in Everyone. Interesting track. It is a studio track, but it's got a live audience mixed in. They recorded crowd noises and the band introduction from, I guess, an earlier concert, and they kind of mixed that in with the studio recording. So they tried to make it sound like it was a live song, when in fact it was just live concert noises dubbed at the beginning and end of the song to kind of give it that characteristic. So an interesting song in that regard. It's probably the most modern song on the album. It's probably the one that's most of a true, just straightforward rock song. G Turns to D. That's a key track to me because that is the one that has been bothering me for the last couple of days, just in this continuous loop around my head all day, all night. It's a very catchy song. It's got a kind of a late 70s guitar groove. Almost sounds like something that you'd hear maybe on a Police record. But very clear John Lennon influence with the vocals again. Everything You've Done Wrong, it's track 7. Very distinctive song. It's got a trumpet intro. One of the only songs I know of on here, maybe the only one that's got a horn section. Kind of reminds me of something from an early Chicago album. And I think the Lines You Amend starts out acoustic, but there's some real clear 1960s influenced guitar fills throughout. So it's kind of interesting. They really balance modern sounds with classic British rock sounds. And these guys are Canadian, but they look and sound like they were from 1960s England. That is not an original or creative idea. You're not really innovating anything when you're looking to the 60s and early 70s for influence and trying to make your album sound like it's from the 60s or 70s. But that doesn't detract anything from the album to me. It's great if you do it properly. And I think when I bought this album, I was kind of hoping there's going to be a little bit more of a grunge punk sound, because that's what I was kind of into at the time. So beyond the songs I was familiar with, I'm like, I'm not sure what I think of this. But listening back 2 decades or so later, I would say it's a good listen. At least, I mean, if you listen to it all the way through, it's definitely interesting. The way they interpret classic sounds and combined it with a little touch of mid-90s rhythms and stuff. Just the way that they kind of blended their modern rhythms with these old-fashioned leads and old-fashioned vocals. It's interesting. I've heard their song Underwhelmed. It's a good song. It's very different from anything on this album. And Money City Maniacs, very different from anything that's on this album. That's one of their heaviest songs. You can't even tell it's the same band. Well, that was kind of the style that I was hoping that they would do on this album a little bit more at the time I bought this. I think this is really where their heart is. I think just by the visual of this band and the cover photos and everything, and how many times they really try to bring out 60s and 70s influences in each of these songs, I really believe that this is the album they wanted to create. And I believe that this was truly where their heart was. So they didn't challenge the listener. They're basically taking the listener to the past of rock and roll. We've heard music like this, and we've all heard Beatles music. We've heard a lot of British rock. But that doesn't detract from it. It just, you have to do a good job with it. You can't do it half-hearted. And these guys really, I mean, I think this is what they really wanted to do. I think this is the album they really wanted to create. They tried other things. They were probably a little more commercially successful with the heavier, more modern stuff. This is definitely a much more retro album, and I think this is really where really where their heads and their minds were and their hearts were at the time. It's better. I like it more. I respect it more. I understand what they were going for more. I think it's probably a little more consistent. And so I definitely like it more now than I did when it first came out. I respect their strict adherence to trying to recreate the sounds that they were influenced by as faithfully as possible. It's not something I would listen to regularly. After a couple listens in the car CD player for this show prep, it kind of lost my attention a little bit. There are a couple songs that get a little weak at the end. It's a good album. It's better than it was to me when it was new. But this is not something I am always going to be in the mood for. And I think this is better when you listen to it in smaller doses. You've really got to want that. You're really going to want that 90s meets 60s Beatlemania really badly to listen to this all the way through on most occasions. It's a little, and because it's kind of that acquired taste, it's not the most accessible album. If you liked primarily their grunge stuff, you're going to be disappointed by this. I'm not disappointed by it. I'm just not always in the mood for something like this. Something where they've got so many 60s influences kind of hiding out in these songs. I'm not always in the mood for John Lennon style vocals. And the thing is, it's been done before. So many other bands have done it. I would say these guys do it better, and I believe them. I believe that they're more authentic with it. So that's kind of a plus. They're not breaking any new musical ground here. They're doing a good job recreating the musical ground that they are treading. Not something I could listen to every day. Not something I could listen to often. It's got some weak spots. I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. Or a 3.5 out of 5, rather. This is for what it is. I mean, it's a 3.5 out of 5. I would say it's slightly above average, but if you're looking for something that's more of their Money City Maniac style, this is not the one to go to. Just a side note, this was released in 1996. My copy here says copyright 1997. That's because this is a U.S. copy. They actually, I guess, reprinted this when they imported it here to the States. So if you find a copy of this is copyright 1996, that's the original Canadian market, native market release. And I just thought that was interesting because I saw it said 1997 on there, and I did some research on the album and said it was a 1996 release. I'm like, why is that? Turns out it's because I have the later official U.S. copy with a different date stamped on it. So I don't think that affected the track listing at all. I don't think that affected how many songs were on it. I think musically and in the order that these songs appear, it's probably identical to the Canadian copy, but you never know. Anyway, I would play this, but I just don't know yet what my copyright limitations are. So if you're into Beatles music, if you're into the 60s sound, if you like modern music, but you also like the classic sounds and wouldn't mind hearing them combined together, give it a listen. You'll probably find it on social media or so. One Chord to Another from Sloan. 3.5 out of 5. I'll catch you later. Thanks.